Hi there, welcome to my channel. My name is Tana and I am a busy working mom to two little ones. And in today's video, I am going to be sharing just a little bit more about my birth story with my first son. If you saw my previous video, you know that I had a high-risk pregnancy with him. In my first video, I talked about the fact that I was diagnosed with a molar pregnancy. And in my last video, I talked about the fact that I actually had Vasa Previa with him. So if you are interested in hearing more about the story and those details, you can go back and watch part 1 and part 2 of my birth story. But in this video, I'm going to actually talk about how he came into the world and the day he was actually born. Just to kind of catch you up in case you didn't see part 2, because I had Vasa Previa, I was on hospital bed rest for almost a month with him. Where the baby's blood supply was in the wrong place and in a dangerous place, because essentially his blood supply was crossing over my cervix. Very, very dangerous for the baby, and in fact, if undiagnosed, the baby would likely die. And I went into the hospital around 32 weeks of pregnancy, and my goal was to make it to 35 weeks before having to have a planned C-section. Vasa Previa, when you have it, there's really no other option. You have to have a C-section. And I was very nervous about that, but at the same time, like, I didn't really have a choice and there was nothing I could do about it. So I kind of just had to go with what I was being told. I was really, really fortunate in that I ended up making it to 36 weeks before having my planned C-section, which 36 weeks is almost full term. Full term is considered 37 weeks or later. So I basically had what you would call a late preterm birth or a late preterm baby, because he was 36 weeks and, you know, on the healthier side as far as being developed and whatnot. I had also had betamethasone shots while in the hospital to help his lungs develop, because that's generally what develops last. If you don't know, the lungs is actually what indicates to your body to go into labor. So when the baby's lungs are fully developed, the baby gives off like a protein, essentially. The lungs give off a protein and your body picks up on that, and that's how your body knows to actually go into labor. So that's like, it's a whole system. It's amazing. Birth is just the coolest subject, and that's part of why I'm here on YouTube, because I just find it so fascinating. Love talking about it and connecting with other moms and other people who are about to go through it themselves. So anyway, I ended up having him at 36 weeks. And my C-section was scheduled for 5 p.m. that day. And my mom came into town, and my husband was there. And I knew I was going to be going into the OR, which was a little nerve-wracking. And I wasn't allowed to eat that day. So I was just trying to do anything I could to kind of like keep my mind off the fact that I was going to be having surgery. Up until this point, I had never really had surgery before. I had had my tonsils removed as an adult, but other than that, and my wisdom teeth, I guess. But other than that, I had never really had too many surgeries. I had had like maybe one other procedure where I had to go under when I had a leap a couple years prior. But yeah, I never like broken a bone or like had any kind of major surgery. So I was pretty nervous about it. I was kind of weirded out by the fact that I was going to be awake as they cut into my stomach. I don't know, the whole thing was just like kind of creeping me out, if I'm being completely honest. And I had a lot of anxiety about it, and having it be like later in the day, I think was not good for me. Like, it would have been a lot better if it was at like 8 a.m. so that I could just wake up and get it over with. Finally got wheeled downstairs in my wheelchair, maybe around like 5:30. They were running behind. The OR had been really busy that day. The hospital that I gave birth at has a very high C-section rate, so they have 3 ORs, and I think all of them were full like all day long, which is kind of crazy to think about. But I got downstairs to labor and delivery, and my husband and I were in the room. My mom was there. I had to sign all the paperwork, like acknowledging that I was having surgery and having a C-section. They went to give me a new IV. I had had IVs port in my arms the whole time I had been in the hospital for about 20 days at this point. And my arms were black and blue, like so black and blue, disgusting looking, like, ugh, God, it was rough. They were worried that I was gonna need to have a blood transfusion, because sometimes that's possible when you have Vasa Previa. The way they have to take the baby out, I guess, is slightly different. So I needed 2 IVs, and they were having a really hard time finding somewhere to even put them at this point. And I remember them looking in my feet to find a vein. Up until this, I think I had had like a 22 or 24 needle, but for this particular time for the C-section, they actually wanted to use an 18, which again, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a medical professional, but how I understand it is like the smaller the number, the bigger the needle actually is, and the quicker, I guess, the blood can flow. So this was like a pretty big needle, and I was pretty scared, and they couldn't put it in my feet. They couldn't find anywhere. So they ended up putting them on my wrists. I had one here and I had one here, which was super uncomfortable and super weird. I was laying on the OR bed with my hands stretched out. It just felt really strange to be laying there like this with like 2 huge needles in my hands. After I got all prepped and ready to go, they took me back to the OR without my husband, and he had to wait outside while they did my spinal. So the kind of spinal that I had was an epidural and a spinal together, a dura-epa spinal, I think is what it was called. So anyway, I remember going to the OR. I had to go alone. My husband wasn't able to come. It was very nerve-wracking, and they had me sit on the edge of the bed, which, by the way, the surgical table is so narrow. I felt so incredibly fat because I felt like I was gonna spill over the side, especially when I was super pregnant and had been on bed rest and had gained a ton of weight, honestly, while I was on bed rest at this point, and felt so gross. And I had to sit there. I don't think I told you all this, but I had a huge fear of needles. Like, anytime I would get my blood drawn, I would get a shot. Like, I didn't even get the flu shot, because anytime I got a shot, I would pass out. I had that vasovagal response that sometimes people can have, and I would just pass out. So I've always been super afraid of needles. Part of the reason I was so scared of the C-section was I knew I was gonna have this giant needle put in my back. And I had sort of conquered my fear of needles at this point, because I had to get a new IV when I was in the hospital. Basically, like every 3 days they would change my IV. So I was getting stuck nonstop. So I don't know, at some point I guess I outgrew this response, this vasovagal response that I was having. I knew I was gonna get this huge needle put in my back, and I was super nervous about it. And then the OR nurse was in front of me, and she had me hug a pillow and try to stay as straight as possible. And then the anesthesiologist was behind me, and she put the needle in, and I felt it go in. And then she said to me, okay, your legs might feel a little bit tingly. And all of a sudden it felt this like warmth, basically. And then I felt this tingly sensation where I just felt like I couldn't feel my legs much. And I remember saying, I'm gonna pass out. I did pass out. They said that that was normal, because I guess your blood pressure can change a lot when you get that big of a needle or that type of injection. And so they were able to stabilize things pretty quickly, and I came to. I don't think I was out for long, but it definitely was scary because that was the first experience. My husband wasn't there yet. They hadn't let him in. The doctor wasn't there yet. They hadn't cut me open yet, and I was already feeling so scared, and I passed out and was just, I was just a ball of nerves. Like, I could not wait to get this whole process over with. I remember that I had talked to my doctor about having a gentle cesarean section. I had read a lot about this. They basically use a clear drape instead of one that you can't see through. Also, they do this thing where they take a cheesecloth and basically push it up your birth canal to get the bacteria and like all the microorganisms, and then they take this cheesecloth and like rub it all over the baby, and it's supposed to sort of mimic the good bacteria that the baby would have gotten if the baby had come naturally down the birth canal. And I remember talking to my doctor about this. I also talked to him about placenta encapsulation, just like a whole bunch of things I had read about. And he was like, do you really want to see me cut you open? And do you really want to see all that? And I decided no, that I didn't want to see all that. And I ended up not going down this gentle C-section route. I just went with this standard planned C-section, I guess. I was laying there with my giant IVs in my hand, like my arms stretched completely out, which I don't think that when you get a C-section, you always have to do that, because I've seen in other birth vlogs, and I've talked to other friends of mine who say that their hands were just at their side or just crossed over them. Most people were not strapped down. I had cuffs on my arms. So I had giant IV here, and then I had a cuff like this, like over my hand, and it was on both sides. So I felt like I was just, even just that sensation of feeling like I was stuck to the surgical table just made me feel so claustrophobic. My husband was here at my head. I remember after he came in, he was allowed to sit like in a stool like right by my head, and the anesthesiologist was on this side, so she was right there the whole time. And I had a ton of people in the delivery room because I was high risk. So I had, my doctor was there, he had another doctor there. I think, I don't go to a teaching hospital, so I don't think he was like a resident or anything like that, but I think that Vasa Previa is just so rare that there was another doctor who's extremely interested in sitting in on the delivery, and I agreed that that would be fine. So he was there. I think I had 6 nurses in the room, 2 nurses that were dedicated to the baby, and then I had like 4 other nurses. I think one was helping the anesthesiologist, and then the other ones were helping the doctor. But I'm pretty sure there were 4 or 5 women in the room that were nurses. And then I also had the head of neonatal in the delivery room as well. So they had sent him as opposed to one of the other baby doctors because they thought he was likely gonna have to go to the NICU right away. So they had him there as well. So it was just like a lot of people, a lot of commotion. It was calm because my doctor is a super calm individual, and like I was so happy I picked him as my doctor because throughout my entire pregnancy, he calmed me down. He was always so calm and had the most amazing bedside manner that he just had a way of helping me calm down and not be so anxious throughout the entire process. So I remember laying there and they gave me the catheter, which I saw that whole process because the lights were above me and they were so bright, and there was also like a mirror. It wasn't a mirror, it was a light, the way that it was angled, like I could see the reflection in it, so I could see everything that was going on. And I remember saying to them, like, can you move that light, because I do not want to see you cut me open. They adjusted the light, but I saw the catheter and all that, and I was just like, this is so insane that you're down there and like I can't feel anything. Like, it was just the weirdest thing. And right before my doctor like cut me open, he said something to me, and I remember I made a joke and he laughed and he was like, oh, you guess you're in a good mood. And I said to him like, oh, well, if I can't, like, I don't know, I would think I was like honestly loopy because I was like cracking jokes the entire time. And I think it was like my coping mechanism that day was just to make as many jokes as possible. But yeah, he, I guess, cut me open. And if you've not seen what happens when you have a C-section, it's graphic. But yeah, he cut me open. I remember feeling a lot of pressure, and what was really weird, like they told me that I might experience pressure, and I think I have a pretty low pain tolerance, or at least I thought that I did at this point in my life. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, am I gonna feel it when they cut me? And I didn't feel sharp or anything like that. I just felt like I had pressure. And then I remember that the pressure, my pelvic area, the pressure felt like it was like below my ribs or like below my breasts. Like everything just felt like it was shifted up, which was really strange. Like even when he was like pushing on my stomach, it felt like he was pushing on my chest. Like that part was kind of weird, that the perception of like where he was or what he was touching, like it always felt higher than where he actually was on my body. So that was kind of a strange thing about getting the actual epidural. So I heard my baby cry, and that was just like an amazing sound to hear because I was, you know, I had been so anxious this entire pregnancy, and now he was finally out and finally safe. And in a way, I almost felt like he was safer on the outside than he was on the inside, because I had sort of felt like a ticking time bomb the entire time I was pregnant. And they didn't hold him over the drape like they normally would for C-section. I think a lot of times like they will show you your baby and then they'll take the baby. In this case, the neonatal doctor wanted to see him right away, so they took him to the side, and my husband could see all that's going on. It was all in the same room, so he could see, and he was like kind of narrating to me like what was going on because I couldn't see because of the drape. They checked him out, everything looked really good, and they were really impressed actually that he looked as healthy as he did. They weighed him, the doctor gave another once over after they got him cleaned off, and then they finally brought him over to my husband, and my husband got to hold him, and I just was looking at him. He basically just held him while they stitched me back up. And I didn't need a blood transfusion. I ended up being super lucky. Didn't need anything like that. I just thank God that the surgery went like as well as it did, that I was blessed to meet the doctor that I had, and that everything just worked out for the best. And I truly believe that my first baby, my son, is a miracle. The fact that he is here and he is now a toddler and with us, because there were so many points of time in my pregnancy where it felt like that wasn't gonna be the case, you know? First telling me that I had a molar pregnancy and that I needed to basically abort the pregnancy, and then finding out I had this Vasa Previa condition, and then sitting in the hospital. Like it was all very exhausting and dramatic, and I was just ready for that part to be over. And so after they stitched me up, they transferred me to a bed that could actually be wheeled back to triage. He was all cleaned and then swaddled up in a blanket with a little hat on, and they put him like kind of in the nook of my arm. Obviously I couldn't feel my legs or anything because I had had a C-section. And then I was in some pain. So they wheeled me back to triage, and once I got into triage, they kind of like checked my vitals and things like that. And then my mom and my mother-in-law were allowed to come into the room and see me and see the baby. They then put him on my chest to try to do like skin to skin. They were trying to get him to nurse or latch, but he wouldn't really latch. He was kind of like, he was sleepy, like his eyes were just like closed basically. I mean, I think he was kind of like, what the what? Like I thought I was gonna come into the world on my own time and you all like ripped me out of my cozy home. Yeah, they had him on my chest, and the worst part of after the actual surgery was that they had to push on my stomach. Like I think they pushed on my stomach like every 5 minutes, and they pushed on my stomach hard. And they explained that they were like trying to get my uterus to contract, and they had given me Pitocin as well, and they were trying to just like get everything to contract back down. And it just, the whole thing was weird. It did not feel natural at all. I mean, it wasn't natural. Basically they took my body and they put me into shock because they cut me open and took a baby out of me. Like that is not how babies come into the world naturally, and that is the farthest thing from a natural birth. And I've had a natural birth later, which I'll talk about in another video, so look for that below if you're interested in that video. And I had to stay in triage for maybe like 2 or 3 hours before they brought me back up to postpartum, and I was so itchy. I was so itchy and I was so tired, and they told me that being itchy was possibly a side effect of the spinal, but I didn't think it was gonna be that itchy. Like I felt like my skin was like crawling, like I was just like itching nonstop, and I couldn't sleep. And they were like, oh, we can give you some Benadryl to help you sleep. And I was like, okay, great. Like I didn't know that Benadryl is actually terrible for your milk supply. He went to the nursery the first night, and I know they gave him formula, and he was having a lot of trouble with his blood sugars. They had to prick his foot like every 4 hours, which was, that in and of itself was kind of like traumatic for me, because he would scream, cry, and I just felt so bad that he had all these little you know, marks on his feet from where they were drawing his blood. And it's kind of disturbing when they have to take a baby's blood. They prick their foot and then they have to like squeeze the blood out, and it was just a lot. There's just a lot of things that I learned from the 4 days that I was in the hospital after the C-section and before going home. That was how he came into the world, and I will share more in another video just about the blood sugars and what happened, because he was under the lights for bilirubin and just a couple of other, you know, things. I didn't know if he was going to be able to come home with us, because by day 3 they were really concerned about his blood sugars, and he was under the lights full time. They could hold him because the way the lights worked, they like wrapped around his body. They brought like a special one in so he could be in our room. We weren't even sure he was going to be able to come home with us. It was a Sunday, and I remember it was like 7 p.m. The hospital was pretty dead because it was a Sunday, and I was starting to think that we were going to have to go home without him, which was like devastating to me. But luckily he ended up passing his final blood sugar test and his final bilirubin level check, and he did get to come home with us. But 2 days later we were like back at the hospital. So I'll talk about that in another video, because this video is already quite lengthy. There's so many things I wish I had known before I had a C-section. This is part of why I'm making this video, because if you know you have to have a C-section, or you're planning to have a C-section, I think there are things that you can do. Like if you have to have one for medical reasons, like no judgment. Like I understand, like I had one for medical reasons. I get it, like it happens. But I do wish there were things I would have been educated on, or things I wish I would have known, because I would have done things differently. I would have declined the Benadryl. Like I would have rather been itchy than have my milk supply possibly be delayed. He didn't need to go to the NICU, but they told me like, oh, he should go to the nursery to be monitored. You should sleep, and this is the best thing for you. And now I know that that's not true. I should have kept him with me. We should have been doing skin to skin. There's no reason that he needed to go to the nursery. They gave him formula in the nursery. There's just so many things that I felt like I honestly had PTSD from it. Once I got home, then I started going through all my breastfeeding struggles. In retrospect, felt like there were so many things that I would have done differently, and I was like saddened by it, and I was kind of like hurt by it. I felt like I was hurt by the system, that here is a new mom who basically doesn't know, right? Because we don't necessarily have the best education, I think, when it comes to the fourth trimester, what actually goes on after you have a baby. There's so much discussion when you're pregnant about how to get through pregnancy and what to pack for the hospital and all those things, but I don't necessarily think the medical community does a great job of educating you on what is actually going to happen when the baby comes. From a society standpoint, don't do that great of a job anymore either, because we don't live in, you know, villages or communities like we used to, where we have someone there who's kind of like helping us through these early days with the baby. Sure, my mom came and visited me and was an enormous help and was here for 2 weeks when I had my kids, which was amazing. But at some point she has to go home and I have to go back to work, and it's just like very unnatural, I think, in a lot of ways. And obviously I'm a working mom. I fully support women who decide to go back to work, but I think it's really hard. You want to go back to work, you know, you are career oriented, you have a lot of strong feelings about making sure that you keep your individuality when you become a mom, but then at the same time you have this like dueling feeling of, you know, like you don't want to abandon your baby during the day, and you don't want to miss his first steps, and you don't want to miss his first word, or all the things that you feel like you might miss when you're at work. And I know I've struggled with that a lot over the years, and honestly it's part of why I'm here on YouTube, because I think that women should be talking about this more, and we should come together and help each other through that. So if there are things that I can offer, or things that I wish I would have done differently that maybe you can do differently, I want to make sure that I'm passing that on to somebody else. And so in a strange way, this is like the modern way, I guess, of making sure that we are coming together, because it truly does take a village to raise a child. Maybe this village just sort of is social media these days, and maybe it's this little corner of the internet. I'm not sure, but I know that that's part of why I'm here. And I think it's important for you to know that if you decide that you want to subscribe to my channel and learn more about what I've experienced. I just want to thank you so much for watching. If this video was helpful to you, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I really appreciate you being here, and if I helped in any way, that makes me feel good, because I'm just trying to help someone else with my story. Please subscribe if you're interested in pregnancy, postpartum, and motherhood as a working mom, or if you just want to learn more about C-sections versus natural birth. And I also would be happy to make videos on my breastfeeding experience and exclusively pumping versus nursing directly, because I've done all of those things too. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.